I was down in the basement, working to finish the recreation room I promised my 15-year-old daughter Janet. I had already finished the ceiling and walls and had closed in the section under the steps for extra storage, and now I was putting down the indoor-outdoor carpet I brought home last night. I had all the time I needed to work on it since my wife Jamie was in Cleveland visiting her mother. I had the whole house to myself today since Jan was sleeping over with one of her high school friends. I had spoken with the mother who assured me that she and her husband were going to be home at all times. They were good people and friends, so it was okay with me. I thought back to Sunday night, the night before Jamie left. She had been angry with me as usual and wouldn't talk to me about her visit. She just said that she needed the time away to herself and that she would be gone for 2 weeks. Jamie didn't work since she had been let go during a cutback at the bank about 2 years ago. But since I made good money, there was no reason for her to have to work, so she decided to stay home, at least for a while. I had hoped that the time off would allow her to relax, and maybe we could repair the gaps in our marriage. It hadn't been of much help so far. My name is Jim Schwan, and I'm 50 years old and a partner with Harris, Schwan & Wilson, attorneys. Joe Harris and I founded the practice here in St. Louis almost 20 years ago. Margaret Wilson joined us 5 years later. We specialized in corporate law, and the practice did very well. I hadn't been in court much in recent years since we had a core of very talented young lawyers who were hungry and eager to show that they could be an asset to our firm. They all wanted to be partners. But since we had added only 1 or 2 partners in 17 years, they fought all the harder, as lawyers are wont to do when told there was virtually no chance. I mentored, guided them through the pitfalls of corporate legal matters, and then let them do their thing. Margaret was the practicing partner, and she was a tigress, using them like slaves. But they seemed happy with the time at our firm, and it was certainly good for their resumes. Jamie and I were married 19 years ago, the second marriage for both of us, and we had a daughter together named Janet. My first wife died in a car accident, and we had no children, but Jamie had a son from her first marriage, now 24, who lived with his father after the divorce. He was married with kids of his own now, and Jamie sometimes spoke with him by phone, but to my knowledge had never visited them. She never wanted to talk about him, so I eventually let it drop. We had Janet 16 years ago, and she was the last for us since Jamie had some serious problems during delivery, finally requiring a hysterectomy. It was the end of her childbearing years, but it was fine with both of us. We did go through the process of retrieving and saving some of Jamie's eggs before the procedure, but we let them expire without doing anything with them. Jan was enough for both of us, and anyway, at the time we needed to decide, the marriage wasn't all that strong. Jamie's parents lived in Cleveland, and we used to visit them twice a year as a family. Jamie occasionally went by herself or with Jan, but it had been some time since Janet or I had been there. Over a year if my memory served. Jamie had gone to visit her parents shortly after being let go. Rather than things getting better as I hoped, her mood had worsened after she stopped, and when she finally said she wanted to go home to her mother for a while, I readily agreed. We both thought it might be good for us to be apart for a while. I missed her after just a few days, but she must not have felt the same. She stayed 10 days, extending the visit from the original planned 1 week to stay over 1 more weekend. My parents were both dead, and I was an only child, so John and Ruth, her parents, were the only family I had. The relationship between her mother and me was not a good one, and Jamie seemed to be more attached to her mother than to her father, so that caused a problem. I liked her dad, and he and I became friends. We kept in touch by phone or email, but even that had declined over the past 2 years. I assumed it had to do with the attitude of her mother towards me. She and I hardly spoke, and my relationship with her father was a casualty of that. But I never resented her visits with her parents. This time was not a routine visit. It followed a period of almost a year of very strained relations between us, having gotten worse after she returned from her last visit. Jamie had been very withdrawn and angry for some time, almost since the day she returned. She was always demanding something from me. Do this, do that, go here or there. Just demands and angry recriminations if I didn't jump when she spoke. Hard as it was to believe, everything became much worse since her last trip home. She was not the same with Jan, however, or I believe I might have done something about it. But I didn't, and now it had become almost a habit to listen quietly as she harangued me about the latest failure of mine and then walk away. She had become used to doing what she wanted, when she wanted, and I let her to avoid an angry outburst. I even allowed it to continue in front of Jan, and when we were out with friends or in public. I know people thought I was a wimp, henpecked and useless, but it was my choice to avoid a scene. I knew it might have been a mistake, but it was my decision, and too late to worry about it now. Her approach to this trip was typical. After several days of repeated phone calls, she made the decision to go, then simply told me about it. She was going to spend 2 weeks there. No discussion, no question about my plans or anything that might have made it difficult for me if she left. She ignored my requests for an explanation, telling me to deal with it. She did tell Jan about it, and spent some time with her to be sure she was okay with it, and if there was anything I needed to do. She left me a written list of things I should know about Jan's activities, but nothing else. She packed her bags the night before she left and went to bed early. She called a cab in the morning to take her to the airport, and it was made clear to me that my help wasn't required. She didn't even bother to say goodbye. A quick note about our sex life. There was none. We hadn't made love for at least 2 years. For sure not since she lost her job, which was 18 months ago. I know it had been at least 6 months without before she made her last trip home, and even some time before that. When I wanted to talk about it, she refused. If I made a move in bed, she would get up and go into the spare room, leaving me frustrated and angry. And the more I pushed, the harder she resisted. I finally gave up. I considered the options, mentioned some of them to Jamie one night when she refused, and got an earful of what she would do to me if she caught me cheating on her. When I mentioned a divorce based on mental cruelty, she laughed and told me to consider the effect on my public image when she admitted in court that she shut me out of the bedroom. This brought on a furious outburst from me as to why she would stay with me when she obviously hated me, wanted nothing to do with me sexually, and wanted to be alone as often as possible. The reaction to my angry outburst was a surprise. Jamie burst into tears, cried for the longest time, and then when she got herself under control, told me that she loved me, always had and always would. She was under so much stress and so confused that she was not sure why she reacted as she did, but she begged me for patience and tolerance. She even promised to look for someone to try to help her. Her pleas were so heartfelt and emotional that I was stunned. So stunned that I remained sitting on the edge of the bed as she took her clothes and went to the spare room. I was still confused the following morning when she reverted to her normal abusive behavior. That brings us to today. She had been gone a day and a half. I had been thinking about our relationship for some time, and I was beginning to believe the only thing I could do was file for divorce. Jan was old enough to be able to handle it, and would probably be happier anyway. She hated the way her mother treated me and told me so many times. But she was still young, and I had tried to hold out for her sake. Maybe now I had no other choice. I felt I was young enough to believe I had a life left to live, and I needed more than Jamie was willing to give me, and the only way to get it was to let her go. The problem was that I still loved her in spite of the way she was, and the way she treated me. I believed divorce would hurt me more than it would her. This was on my mind as I carried some boxes down from our bedroom to the newly finished storage space under the steps. Jamie had demanded that I clear out our closet when I made room downstairs, and I was pleased that I found so much free space. Now seemed like a good time to move things. This way, I could do the work without her nagging at me. I was almost to the bottom of the steps on my third trip when my foot slipped and I dropped the 2 boxes I was carrying. I watched them fly as I grabbed the railing to keep from following them. They hit the floor, splitting open and spilling their contents all over the new carpet. Fortunately, there was no liquid or powders in the boxes, so it seemed to be okay. I went down, got 2 empty boxes, and started to rebox the stuff. That's when I discovered a packet of what seemed to be notes or letters or something like that. They were held together with a blue ribbon. I had never seen them before, so they aroused my interest. I put them aside thinking they were probably love letters to Jan from one of her boyfriends. I put the remaining things in the boxes and pushed them toward the stair storage well. I made 2 more trips before I had all the designated boxes downstairs and stored under the steps. I closed the panel doors and collapsed on the floor, my back against one of the walls and my feet stretched out in front of me as I tried to catch my breath. As my breathing returned to normal, I noticed the stack of letters and pulled them toward me. I untied the ribbon and pulled out the first one. I noticed that it was addressed to my darling Jamie. Immediately, I felt a surge of interest, followed by an equally strong surge of anger. I had never written anything like this to Jamie at any time in our marriage or even before. This was not from me. My breathing, which had slowed to almost normal, began to increase again. Only this time it was not fatigue. I unfolded the letter, noting that it had been folded and unfolded many times. The creases were deep and the letter was almost in 3 pieces. This letter had been read over and over, obviously treasured by Jamie. I carefully held it and read the words it contained. My darling Jamie, I have been thinking of the last night we spent together. I can't get your wonderful body out of my mind. Your BJ drove me crazy. That was almost more than I could stand. And when you stopped, I wanted to cry. The way you made love to me drove me to heaven. I know I'll not stop thinking of you as you leave me to go back to your loveless marriage. Why won't you leave him and come to me for all time? You know my story, that I also am in a loveless marriage, and I would divorce my pathetic wife in an instant if you would say you would come to me. You know that. Please, my Jamie, reconsider. Tell me you are coming back to me. With all my love, Walter. The shock I felt was so intense, I think I sat there for almost an hour before regaining my senses. I looked again at the letter and scanned the words, but they remained the same. My wife had cheated on me. With someone named Walter Matthews, or so it said on the return address. I quickly looked back at the letter and looked for a date. There on the top of the letter, in small letters, was the date. It was 3 days after my wife came back from her visit to her mother a year ago. I grabbed the stack and pulled out another one. I read the words, and they were much the same except these described a different encounter. This one was talking about a BJ in the front seat of his car in the parking lot of some club or other. She had gone down on him at his request. He loved it, of course. I would too if she had ever allowed me to do that. But she hadn't. She complained that it was yucky. I wondered if his was yucky as well. I scanned the rest, and they were all from that same trip. It seemed she met him halfway into her trip and decided to extend the stay to be with him over that last weekend. Apparently, Walter had tried to convince her to leave me, but she was not buying it, and I knew her well enough to know why. She didn't want the trouble of trying to make it on her own, and being the woman she was, she probably demanded he divorce his wife first before doing the same for herself. As a matter of fact, I wondered if she felt anything for him other than lust. The lust she denied me. I let the last of the letters fall from my fingers as I let the enormity of what she did sink into my consciousness. Sitting there in the basement, I thought about the whole thing. That she had done it was clear from the letters, and the fact that she kept them. That it happened when she went to visit her mother was also clear from the dates on the letters. As I considered these, I wondered how she got the letters without my noticing. I went back to the stack, sorted through them, and found what I was looking for. There was a larger envelope, the return address that of her mother. Her mother had forwarded the letters. So, her mother was aware of what she did and who she did it with. I was not surprised. Not at all. I carried the stack of letters upstairs with me and put them on the table. My mind had been working, trying to determine what I was going to do. I knew now that my marriage was over and I would no longer be the butt of her anger and her demands. Up to now, I was her patsy because I was waiting for her to remember that she loved me as I loved her. But that wasn't the case. She didn't love me, and her attitude reflected her contempt for me and her lack of concern for my welfare. She was in love with someone else, and she was just too afraid to leave me to go to him permanently. That, and the fact that he was also married. And was she sure he would really leave his wife? Wasn't that an interesting question? I considered several alternatives, but I kept coming back to the fact that I could no longer stay with Jamie now that I knew. She didn't love me, and I was in no hurry to endure any more of her contempt. I knew I should wait and talk to her, but I had no patience for that. No, this was the end. It stops now. I made up my mind that come tomorrow I would send out one of the PIs we used to find out what I needed to know, but until then, I would be planning a life without Jamie. But before I did that, I had a couple of things to do. The first was to save all of the letters from old Walt and put them somewhere safe. Those letters were a clear admission of adultery by old Walter. As a lawyer, I knew just how to use them. She would eventually discover them missing, but till then, no reason to let Jamie know how much I knew. And I didn't want my impressionable daughter to see them. I was afraid she would get ideas and turn out like her mother, a simple street hooker. Once I made sure the letters were put away, I relaxed and began to plan out my options. It was 3 days later on a Thursday when she called me. Only one call over the past week while she was gone, and that to tell me she wanted me to send her a couple of things from the desk. I asked her why she didn't just wait till she was home, but she came back with one of her sarcastic comments about my lack of concern for her. I finally agreed, still waiting for my PI's report before saying anything. I had contacted him the day after I found the letters, and he had been there a few days already, but I hadn't heard anything from him yet. She didn't say much of anything, asking once about how Jan was doing, and then she hung up without any words of endearment or affection. Just like her. That was the last call that week, and into the next week. I expected nothing less from her. At my request, the PI had flown to Cleveland, investigated the DMV records, the city tax records, and anything else pertinent to identify the Walter I wanted information on. When I entered my office that Friday before I confronted her, he was waiting for me. I told my secretary that I wasn't to be disturbed and closed my door. He opened a file and proceeded to fill me in. Okay, Mr. Schwann, I think I got what you need. His name's Walter Matthews, and he's 45 years old, married to a Marie Matthews. He's got 5 kids, would you believe? The oldest is 21, and the others vary from 18 to 12. There's a set of twins in there. He and your missus spent the weekend in a motel just off the interstate. Stayed in there most of the day and all night. He owns a car dealership, and he spends most of his time there during the day. Seems to be doing pretty good for himself. Nice home in the burbs, probably worth $500,000 or more even. The older kid is in grad school. The rest are living at home with the mother. She doesn't work, takes care of the house. He shoved a picture toward me, showing a tall man, with dark hair, well-dressed and fairly good-looking. Not much bulk on him, looked more like a thin man. I stared at it for a few seconds before pushing it back. What else did you find? No debts to speak of, just the mortgage on the house at over 200 grand. Business records show regular tax payments and reports of business income. Pulls down about 200 grand a year before taxes. Not too shabby. The rest is routine stuff. His address, phone number, names and ages of his kids and his wife. Copies of his tax returns for the past 3 years, and some comments about him from his neighbors. Seems to be well-liked and no troublemaker. Oh, and one other thing. This you might like. Seems he has a couple of hookers he sees regularly at the local brothel. I have receipts from his last 5 visits. Visits them pretty regular. Once a week at least. Sometimes more. Madam says he's a steady customer and gives her no trouble at all. Likes the young ones best. Hers are all legal, so no help there. One thing occurred to me. Did he visit the hookers last week or this week? That was when Jamie was there. Like clockwork. On Tuesday afternoon. Like I told you before, he spent the weekend with your wife at a local hotel, and the rest of the time, he was home with his wife. Only went out one night during the week, and that was Wednesday. Met your wife at a restaurant. They sat together. Looked all lovey-dovey. Lots of touching and such. Then he left alone. Your wife drove home and stayed there. I did overhear their conversation, though. She was making plans to meet him again that weekend. I thanked him for his work, took possession of the file, and gave him a chit that would see he got paid for his work. I sat back and read the report in full just to get an idea of this man. The only thing I knew for sure was that I wanted revenge. On him for sure. Since she was going to be responsible for taking care of my daughter, I had to leave Jamie alone. Making her my ex-wife would have to do. It was the Friday before she was due to come back, and I was jotting down some notes of things I wanted to do when the phone rang. I was so engrossed in what I was doing that I picked it up without thinking and answered with an abrupt, "Yes, hello? It's me." And that's a stupid way to answer the phone. Where's Jan? I want to talk to her for a minute. I just stared at the phone in my hand. Was this the woman who called herself my wife? For the first time, I realized how she talked to me. Abrupt, dismissive, full of contempt and anger. Well, now it ends. I had no desire to string her along and play with her like a cat plays with a mouse. Even though I was a lawyer and we made a living manipulating people with words, I wanted none of that. I wanted to hurt her, to make her suffer, to let her feel the pain I felt as I read those damned letters and listened to that report telling me she was in motel room screwing some shit. She's not here. Call back later. I slammed the phone down in anger. Screw her. Let her feel my contempt. It was only seconds before the phone rang again. I let it ring for 5 or 6 rings before picking it up and answering the same way. Yes, hello? What the hell do you think you're doing hanging up on me? How dare you? Fury in her voice. Good. At least she was capable of some emotion. I slammed the phone down again, chuckling to myself. I waited, but this time the phone didn't ring again, so I went back to my lists. It was almost 10 o'clock that evening when the phone rang. I checked caller ID this time to see that it was Jamie. I was curious to see how she would handle it this time, so I answered after 5 rings with my same, "Yes, hello? Hello, Jim. It's Jamie. Are you feeling better now? You seemed to be in a bad mood when I called earlier." I decided to wait for a while and hope it would be better now. I wasn't in a bad mood earlier, Jamie. I just didn't want to talk to you when you were making demands. Your constant lack of respect makes me angry. That's all. What do you want? There was a short silence before she answered. I'm sorry you got that impression. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I was just in a hurry and wanted to talk to Jan. I'm sorry you thought I was making demands. Fine. What do you want, Jamie? Why are you calling? I told you Jan wasn't here. What part of that didn't you understand? Calm. Not angry now that she was being respectful. Wasn't she? What do you mean, why am I calling? You're my husband, and I wanted to talk to you. That's all. Why wouldn't I call you when I'm away from home? Don't you miss me at all? Actually, Jamie, it's been sort of peaceful here since you've been gone. No yelling, no demands, no disrespect. Jan is happy and spending a lot of time with me and her friends, and I'm doing what I like with no one criticizing me. And when I go to bed, I have the whole bed to myself. It's not as if I'm missing the sex now, is it? Not for a couple of years now. So, no, I don't miss you, and it's been very nice with you gone. Again with the silence. Are you still there, Jamie, or are you done? I'm here. I guess I'm just surprised at the way you're talking to me. Have you been drinking, Jim? You sound very strange. Not a drop. Not even a beer. Just some coffee and a few crackers. Gotta watch the weight, you know. Well, if I didn't know better, I would think you're happy I'm gone. I was hoping you would want me to hurry home, but maybe I'll just stay a while longer since you don't miss me. Would you like that, Jim? Now there was the Jamie I knew and loved. Soft words delivered with threats and sarcasm. And now with the request to extend the trip just a few days longer so she could screw her lover some more. This conversation was going as she planned, trying to goad me into agreeing to some extra days. But now, I was going to make it go as I planned it. Well, I'll tell you what, Jamie. Why don't you and good old Walter take a few extra days again like you did the last time you went to visit your mother? After all, he did miss your wonderful mouth and your glory holes, didn't he? So rather than hurry back to your loveless marriage, why not make old Walter happy some more? Go screw him a few more times. Seems he's been getting your glory holes a lot more than I have the last couple of years. I slammed down the phone again, but this time I pulled the line from the wall. I heard the phones in the bedroom and the din begin ringing, but they were too far away to be any bother. I pulled myself from my jacket pocket and turned that off as well. I wanted nothing more to do with her right now, and her silence was the best part of her being gone. I was being honest when I told her it was pleasant with her gone. I thought back over the conversation, and the only good thing I could take from it was a suggestion that I go get drunk. That was a good suggestion, and one I could certainly handle. I went upstairs to change and get ready for my night out. I shaved, put on some aftershave, and looked at myself in the mirror. Not bad really for a guy my age. I was still in good shape, working out at the club I belonged to once or twice a week while doing business. I was reasonably good looking, my hair almost white but still full and worn long. And my stomach was not too terrible. Just a little paunch that was contained by my belt. Not bad at all. I walked back downstairs, checked the voicemail, and deleted all the messages from Jamie. I called Jan at the sleepover and let her know I would be out, but to call my cell if she needed me. It would be turned off, but I would check for messages. She assured me I had no need to worry about her and said she wanted to stay there tomorrow until lunch. I told her about her mom wanting to stay a few extra days, and she seemed pleased. I signed off with love and received hers in return. Just before I left, I took off my wedding ring, put it on a piece of string, and hung it from the mirror in our bathroom. While I didn't expect Jamie to leave her lover right away and hurry home to her cucked husband, when she did decide to come home, I wanted this to be her greeting. But also, and more importantly, I didn't want to see any reminders of her tonight while I was out. Tonight was for me. I took one look around, remembering happier times, and then left. I drove across town to a place I hadn't visited for a few years. It was a bar that catered to singles and was known as the place to pick up women or men, depending on your need at the time. I knew the owner, having represented him once in a suit against him and his establishment. I won, and Carmine promised me free booze for the rest of my life. Tonight, I was going to try to make a dent in that promise. I was pleased at the greeting I got when I walked in to see the place almost full. Carmine saw me, raised his hands together in the victory signal, and said something to one of the women at the bar. She quickly got up and held her stool until I arrived. She bowed with a flourish to show me it was now my seat and walked away. Well, if it ain't my main man, Jimbo. How you been, Jimbo? It's good to see you. What you drinking? How's it going, Carmine? Long time. How about you bring me a bottle of the good stuff and just leave it here? I want to get seriously shit-faced, and I knew you were the only one I could trust to keep me from getting mugged afterwards. You got nothing to worry about. Tell Carmine. What's the problem? She is cheating on me, Carmine. Just found out today that she's been doing it for over a year with some worm in Cleveland. She and her mother, the two of them made a cuck out of me. Real witches, those two. When in Rome, you talk the talk that the Romans understood. Carmine was good people, but blunt, plain spoken and to the point. He set a bottle of good scotch in front of me and poured the first glass. He set that down beside a bottle of beer and told me to tell him the story. He waved away another customer that tried to get his attention and signaled for someone else to cover the bar. I started to talk, and 10 minutes later I was done. Carmine just nodded as if he knew it all along and stood up. You just go ahead and drink down your troubles. If you need me to do anything, you just whistle. You hear? In the meantime, drink. I'll watch over you. He moved away and I sipped some more scotch. I had been drinking slowly but steadily for some time before I became aware of someone sitting next to me when I felt a hand brush my thigh. I looked up to see a woman sitting close to me, one hand on her drink and the other rubbing my leg where it rested against the stool I was sitting on. I looked at the hand and then at her and found she was worth looking at some more. She was blonde, her hair a bright golden color. Her eyes were blue as the sky, nicely outlined. The face was gorgeous, but what was most interesting was that it was an older face. I guessed about 45 or even 50. This was a real woman, not a kid. Her face had character, intelligence. Hello there. Who are you? I always was quick with the snappy words. All us lawyers were. Hello yourself. My name's Rachel. Rachel English. And you are? Jim. My name is Jim, and you are very beautiful, Rachel. Her smile was worth more nice words. I wanted to keep her smiling. I searched my learned brain for more words. What is a beautiful woman like you doing alone in a place like this? I can't believe you have to come here to find someone. Any man would give his right arm to be seen with you. I was graced with a huge smile, but that suddenly disappeared to be replaced by a sadness that couldn't ruin the beautiful face, but it did make me sad too. I wanted to make it go away. Why so sad? You shouldn't be sad. I looked down at her hand, still rubbing my thigh, and saw the wedding ring. Your husband cheating on you? Like my wife? No, far from it. My husband was killed in Iraq. He was a colonel and his convoy was ambushed. He died along with most of his men. It happened 2 years ago. I miss him so much. She bowed her head for a few seconds, but when she looked up, her eyes were clear. They say time heals all wounds. For her sake, I hoped it was true. I talked with her some more, and after almost 2 hours, we left together. I was too drunk to drive, but she wasn't. We ended up at her place, and while I would have loved to brag about how long I made love to her, I think I passed out. The last I remembered was her pulling my pants off, and while I was interested in the possibilities, I apparently lacked the will. I woke the next morning in a strange bed, alone and confused. It took me a minute to remember where I was before I saw the beautiful woman from last night, holding a tray with coffee and 2 cups. She was wearing a thin negligee that revealed more than it covered. I lost interest in the coffee very quickly, and when she put the tray down, I reached for her. She came willingly, and the next thing I knew, I was in the middle of a kiss that wouldn't stop. Her lips were soft and warm. We got the hang of it pretty quickly and lost ourselves in each other. We made tender love, and then we fell against each other, both of us somewhat embarrassed. I looked at her and saw she was grinning at me. Well, wasn't that something special? I feel like I'm back in high school. She was almost laughing at the look on my face. Yes, it certainly was. It's good to know I'm not the only one to get off so easily. I smiled back at her, noticing again how beautiful she was. Do you go to Carmine's often? I can't believe a woman as beautiful as you can go to a bar and not have made love before this. No man could resist you. I was serious and she saw that. She looked deep into my eyes before looking away. I'll tell you the truth, but you have to let me finish before you say anything. Do you promise? I promise. Tell me. Carmine called me here at home. He's my brother. He told me to come over and meet a really nice man. He said you were in trouble and that I might be able to help. She sat up, pulling her knees up to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. She looked like a young girl, so beautiful and alive. When I got there, you were already pretty far gone, but the more I talked to you, the more I liked you and the more I began to feel something inside me again. That's why I invited you here to my bed. I wanted someone to make love to me for the first time since my husband died. You were that someone, and it was all I hoped it would be. I was quiet as I looked into her deep blue eyes. She was being honest with me, and I could see it. What she did because she wanted to, not out of pity or kindness. I had helped her as much as she helped me. I told her that and more as we sat there and talked. I wanted to know more about this woman, and we made plans to stay in touch. She knew my situation and knew I would be occupied with that for some time to come, but she offered me her shoulder to cry on, or her bed to share, anytime I wanted it. With her in it, of course. I laughed but accepted in complete seriousness. We made love once more before I got dressed and headed for home. It was just past noon when I pulled in at home, Rachel having driven me back to pick up my car at Carmine's bar. The place seemed deserted, and once inside I confirmed that fact. I wasn't surprised to find that Jamie hadn't rushed home to try to save a doomed marriage, but I was a little disappointed. I had thought that 19 years would mean a little more to her. Apparently not. I walked into the kitchen to fix myself some coffee when I noticed the answering machine light blinking. I checked the log and saw 10 calls, all from Jamie's cell phone. There was one more, and that one was from a number I recognized as Jamie's father. We talked often enough for me to remember the number. That one was interesting enough for me to play. Jim, it's me, Paul. When you get this, please give me a call. Jamie and her mother have gone up to the cabin for a few days at my urging. Jamie wanted to come home at once, but I talked her out of it. They both have a lot of thinking to do. Some you might guess. So, call me on this number. It's my cell. Take care. Interesting. I would return his call as soon as I was ready. In the meantime, I listened to several of the messages from Jamie, all variations of yelling about me, not knowing what I was talking about, and in general, demeaning me again. The last two were less demanding and more desperate, but none made any impression on me. I deleted them all. I checked to see if Jan were home, but there was no sign of her. But she did say sometime afternoon. I suddenly felt hungry and fixed myself a sandwich and a cold beer to fill the stomach and ease the alcohol hangover. I ate slowly, thinking of this morning with Rachel, and that alone was enough to put me into a good mood. I finished up, took the phone into the family room, and called Paul. "Hi, Paul. It's Jim. Returning your call." "Jim, I'm glad you called. I know what's going on and that's why I'm calling. I sent Jamie and her mother to the cabin to get them away from here. I'm furious with both of them, and you know part of why. Well, all I know is that Jamie has been having an affair with some guy named Walter Matthews. It started the last time she was there, or at least I think it did. It may have been earlier than that. And for your information, I believe Ruth knew of it as well, and she was the one that sent his love letters to Jamie here. That's all I know, Paul." "Well, yes, that's the bulk of it. I found out by overhearing a conversation between her and her mother that she was going to spend a weekend with him. That's why she called you, to tell you she was going to stay a couple of extra days. I was furious with Jamie, but all she did was cry when I yelled at her. She's been crying since your phone call last night. She's been going crazy trying to reach you since then. Her mother was being a pain in the butt, telling her you didn't deserve her, that she was smart finding someone else to replace you, that kind of crap. I slapped her across the face. The first time in our marriage that I've ever hit her. It made me sick, but honest to God, Jim, she deserved it." I could hear the pain in Paul's voice as he told me that, but I was also angry knowing what Ruth did to me. She bore some of the responsibility for destroying our marriage, but she wouldn't see that as a bad thing. Too bad I didn't see it coming. Too bad Jamie was so easily led down the path of betrayal. It was too easy for her. It shouldn't have been, regardless of how hard her mother pushed. Paul told me he was going to drive up to see them both tonight and to wait for his call. He asked if I wanted to talk to Jamie, and I told him no. I had nothing to say to her right now, and perhaps never again. I had to think about it. He understood, and we hung up. Jan showed up about an hour later, and rather than waste both our time, I told her what I knew about her mother. It wasn't done out of cruelty, but rather out of respect. Jan was growing up so fast, and she had seen what was going on in the marriage. She was the one caught in the middle, and I wanted her to be aware of what was going to happen. She had some decisions to make, and I wanted to prepare her for that. If the marriage ended, she was old enough to decide where she wanted to go. We listed the pros and cons, and she understood it wasn't an emotional decision, but one of practicality. She was almost an adult, and she had to do what was best for her now as well as later on. We talked together for hours, and it made me proud to see how she took it and how she handled it. In the end, we both decided it was best for her to remain here at the house with her mother. School, meetings, and such would require someone to be free enough to see to her. I couldn't do that. I promised her that I would always be sure she was cared for and that her education was not jeopardized. It was almost 5 o'clock when the phone rang. Jan took the call and I heard her when she said, "Mom, how could you?" I decided to let her talk with her mother first and went outside to sit on the porch. I hated for her to have to deal with something like this, but she had her own life to live and what we did would affect her, so she might as well be part of it. I was still thinking of how I wanted to handle it when she brought the phone to me. "Here, Dad, it's her. I don't want to talk to her again." She had tears in her eyes as she handed me the phone. I wanted to comfort her, but she left quickly, leaving me alone, just as I had her. I watched her go, in no hurry to speak to Jamie. "Hello, Jamie." Just that and no more. I was already exhausted with this whole thing. It had only been 24 hours give or take, but it felt like weeks or months of turmoil. Why did you have to tell Jan? Why were you so cruel? Just to hurt me? Just to get back at me? Jamie was back to her old self already. No problem for her. Just lash out at anybody nearby. Never accept guilt was her motto. Well, I was fed up with it all. Go to hell, you cheating 304. When you can talk to me decently, call. Otherwise, don't bother to call or come back here. Goodbye. I disconnected and held the phone limply in one hand while I waited to see what she would do. It didn't take long. The phone rang. "Hello." I know I sounded like death, but that's how I felt. "Jim, I apologize. I was just shaken that you told Jan what I did. I don't know why you had to do that. I guess it's because you hate me now, isn't it?" "Actually, Jamie, everything isn't about you. You may not believe me, but why I told her had nothing to do with you. But what you did is going to affect her life as well as mine. So I felt she deserved to be treated with the respect, which you've denied me all this time. I told her to give her time to learn to deal with it. That's why. And as for your apology, shove it up your rectum." There was a pause as she thought about that. Then, a quiet question. "Do you hate me, Jim?" No, I don't hate you. To be honest, I have no emotions when I think of you. The past 2 years have just about killed all the love or any emotion whatsoever I had for you. I guess I do feel some anger with I think of you and him, but I'll get over it. I guess you've done a good job of killing whatever I had left of us inside me. Would you believe me if I told you that I'm sorry? That I wish it had never happened? I am so sorry that I let it happen. You didn't deserve this. I'm really sorry, Jim. Well, like I say, Jamie, there is just a hole inside me that used to be filled with thoughts of you. Now it's empty. You asked me the other night if I missed you. The answer is more and more getting to be no. And you're right. You should never have allowed it to happen at all. That's what our marriage vows were about. Our promises to each other. Remember saying them? Forsaking all others. You broke those vows, and now I have to accept that there's nothing there. And once again, I don't need your apologies. They don't mean anything to me anymore. Please tell me you don't mean that. Jim, please tell me you don't feel that way. I'll be home as soon as I can and we can work this out. I know I've done something awful, but I'll make it up to you if you just give me the chance. I don't want to make it work anymore. I would prefer if you just stay away for a while longer. These last few days have been very peaceful for me. I'm doing quite well without you now. Janet and I have some decisions to make about her future. She will do so by herself, and I'm not going to influence her. She probably should stay here with you if she can. She's only got a year and a few months. Jim, you're talking as if it's over between us. Please don't make any decisions like that until I have a chance to talk to you. I know I've screwed up big time, but I can make it up to you if you'll only give me a chance. Jim, I realize now that I love you more than I realized. I forgot for a while, but now I remember why I loved you. I do, and I don't want to lose you. Please wait for me, Jim. Wait till I get home. I piss on your love for me, you 304. Your love means shit to me, Jamie. It stinks and I would rather stay away from it for the rest of my life. As for me, this marriage is over, and like I said, don't bother coming home right away, Jamie. I hung up quickly, the tears starting to flow when I heard her begin to plead with me. I knew it was just an echo of the love that I had for Jamie before she did this to me. That love would die a quick death, but for now, I still had to endure the pain of separation. The phone began to ring almost as soon as I hung up. I glanced at the caller ID to see it was Jamie, and I ignored it. I was done talking to her. I was done with her. That was becoming more and more clear as the enormity of her betrayal began to sink in. It was almost noon on the following Wednesday when my secretary rang to let me know I had a phone call from my wife. It had been 2 days since I had let her know that I wasn't accepting calls from Jamie, so this was a surprise. I asked her why she had accepted the call, and she said it was forwarded from Margaret Wilson. From Margaret? Hell, I had forgotten that Jamie and Margaret were friends. Margaret was a real witch on wheels and had few friends, but she and Jamie hit it off right from the start. I always wondered why, and now I began to see. They were two of a kind. Margaret had been married and divorced 4 times already. Just the role model for my soon-to-be ex. Okay, I'll take it. Not your fault, Susie. Thanks. I pushed the button for line 1. Yes, what is it? And this had better be damned good, Margaret. I'm not going to forget this little betrayal. I knew Margaret was still on the line from the caller ID. Whoa, Jim, I had no idea there were problems. But what the hell are you doing? You a hole? You won't even talk to your wife? She's on when I hang up. Talk to her. Hello, Jamie. What can I do for you? Serious and even-tempered. You can come home and talk to me. I'm at home, Jim, so please, can we talk? Whose home is that, Jamie? Walter Matthews' home? Certainly not our home. You've destroyed that one, haven't you? I heard the muffled sobs, so she had decided on tact and begging. Jim, please come home and talk to me. I owe you an explanation, and I promise to give it to you without any lies or excuses. Please, Jim, come home. What do you really want, Jamie? Just to be taken care of while you do whatever you please behind my back? Isn't that what you've been doing for the past 2 years? You treat me like crap, refuse sex with me, make my life a living hell, then you went to him and screwed him a year ago when you said you were visiting that street hooker that you call mother. You went this time to do the same thing. You made plans to spend the weekend with him again, just like last time. And you were going to insult me until I agreed that you should stay for another. You were trying to use me to justify your cheating. Was the sex that good? Was it that much better? And hell, the things you let him do were things you denied me. So he must really be something. I was laying it on thick now. The anger that had been building was looking for an outlet. Now that she was here, she was the target. Please, Jim, I guess I deserve that, but you're wrong. You're wrong about Walter and me. I didn't even see him this trip. Honest. Bullshit, Jamie. You spent the whole weekend with him at the Dorchester Hotel. And what about Wednesday? Doesn't dinner on Wednesday night count? where you made plans to meet over the coming weekend, telling him you were going to get your stupid husband to insist you stay another few days, sitting close together, touching and God knows what under the table? Or do you just count the times you had sex with him as seeing him? How did you? I just met him briefly to tell him it was over, that I never wanted to see him again. Honest, Jim, I didn't go anywhere with him, and that was the only time I saw him. That's more lies, Jamie. I know what you did. And what about the last trip? Didn't you give him a BJ in the parking lot? Didn't you have sex with him? Do you deny any of that? Silence. The truth was coming down hard on her now. Keep it coming. I was feeling good now. Finally, some retribution. Did you and Walter talk about his 5 kids? How about his twins? Did he mention them? And his wife, Margaret? Did you two talk about her? Did you tell him about me? Laughing about your stupid, unknowing spouses? Laughing at how you were pulling the wool over our eyes. The scream from the other end of the line was enough to surprise me. I held the phone away from my ears, but I heard the click telling me we were disconnected. I hung up, feeling exhausted, wrung out like a wet rag. Limp. I had 2 choices. One, I could go home and talk to Jamie and let her try to justify what she had done. Or second, I could begin to make my plans to end this charade of a marriage now, while I had the pain and the anger burning inside me. I chose the latter. I called in 2 of my young Turks, one specializing in divorce, and briefed them on my situation. It was easier than I suspected, now that I had begun to look at it as a case. Something I had done every day for the past 20 years. My name was on this one, but that was the only thing different about it. They quickly forgot that it was the boss's wife and got down to business. The first thing I wanted was to file suit in Ohio for alienation of affections. It was a rare but legitimate legal charge, and I was going to pursue it to the bitter end. I would probably lose, but that was fine with me. I cared nothing about any money, but I wanted him to answer in court for his philandering, and I wanted his wife and kids to know about it. She would get hurt. I understood that, but she should know what her husband was capable of. She could decide what to do about him then. I gave the letters to one of my young Turks and told him to prepare a motion to require a handwriting analysis and confirmation that they came from Mr. Walter Matthews. After reading the top one, he smiled and tucked them safely into his briefcase. He was flying to Cleveland tomorrow to file and get things started. The other gentleman and I outlined a series of actions designed to close accounts, transfer monies to other accounts, have an outside audit of my holdings and estimates of value. We decided on how to move certain assets before the audit to protect some major holdings. I signed a power of attorney and sat back, watching him begin the process. These 2 were vicious when set loose, and that's what I was counting on. Maximum pain for them with minimum loss to me. By the end of the day, things were happening very fast and I was ready to head home. It was time to begin the process of separating Jamie and I. She started it, but I was going to finish it. As I walked down the hall, heading for my car, it occurred to me that when love morphed into hate, there was no limit to the pain that would result. I walked into the house to find Jamie sitting on the couch with Janet in the family room. It was clear that Janet had been crying and Jamie looked little better. Both turned to me as I entered the room. Janet jumped up, ran to me, and embraced me. She whispered into my ear, "Good luck, Dad. But whatever, I love you." I watched her walk away, her head held high and her pace belying the pain she was in. She was a good girl with a strong will, and she would be fine, regardless of what happened. She was nothing like her mother, and that thought gave me peace. I sighed, walked into the room, and sat down in one of the chairs Jamie bought when she was in a couples mode. Matching chairs and couch. I hated both. "Well, Jamie, I'm here. You wanted to talk to me? Tell me why you screwed up our lives. Why you betrayed Janet and me." "I don't know. I know that's not an answer, but it's true. I just don't know why I did it. I went home the first time to get away from everything. I had no intention of doing anything but just getting away. And for the first week, that's all I did. Then Mom introduced me to this man. She said he was a friend of hers from church and that he was in a bad marriage and would I talk to him. She seemed to be very calm now, and I wondered just what she expected to say that would justify what she did. I had to admit, I was curious. We went to dinner that Friday, the night before I was to fly home. We talked. He was very charming and he complimented me a lot. He would touch my hand when he said something, then he would reach over and push a lock of hair off my face. He was very smooth and I was swept away. As the evening went on, I found myself attracted to him in ways I had not experienced for a long time. Even with you. I know now that it was very wrong, but by the end of the evening, I wanted him. I wanted him in the worst way. You know, we had not made love for months before I went home in my drive. My libido, I guess you call it, was almost gone. But that night, with him, it came back. He saw that, and he drove me to a motel. We made love the entire night. The next day, I called you and told you I was going to stay a couple of extra days. I spent them with Walter in a motel. I listened with an anger growing inside me that was almost white-hot by the time she got to this point. The pain I felt with her betrayal was so strong I wanted to get up and go puke, but I couldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I sat there, pretending to be under control and listened. What I wanted to do was smack her across the mouth until she cried for me to stop. Only my training as a man stopped me. To this day, I regret that. I came home and never told you anything about Walter. I didn't call him or talk to him or write to him afterwards, and I tried to forget what I had done. I also never came to you to make love to me either, mainly because I felt you would somehow know that I had been unfaithful. I couldn't risk that. You may not believe me, but I do love you, and I'm so ashamed of what I've done that I think I might just die. She stopped, tears falling from her eyes and her head bowed in shame. While I believed the shame was real, I believed nothing else. Not her love for me, the reasons for her betrayal, or her fear of my finding out what she did. None of that rang true to me. Well, that's quite a story, Jamie. Why don't I believe a word of it? I'll tell you why. First, you shut me out long before you left, and you were already treating me like shit. Even then. Second, I know some of the things you did with him, and they were things you would never consider doing with me. Why is that, do you suppose? Why give to him what you refused me? And you were going to do it again this time. I had you investigated, and I know you met him the first weekend and spent it with him. I also know that Wednesday night you made plans to spend the weekend with him again. I was breathing hard now, my chest heaving and my hands balled into fists. I was clenching them so hard. My knuckles were white. I know she could see the fury in my eyes. But I wasn't done. You've denied me your body and your heart for almost 2 years. You denied me your love and affection for even longer. And to make it worse, you gave it to someone else. You did things with him you never did with me. Things you denied me, you gave him. Things you said were too dirty to try, you tried with him. You did more than betray me with sex. You betrayed my rights as your husband. You gave my rights to someone else. You and your mother had this planned. I know she never liked me, but what I don't understand is what your mother had against his wife and children. She must have known that Margaret might find out and that his marriage would be destroyed. But she didn't care. She didn't care about your marriage or his marriage. She's always hated me, and she led you down the path of betrayal without a second thought. And you followed her without a whimper. It was too easy for you, Jamie. Too easy for you to betray me and our marriage. That shouldn't have been the case. It shouldn't have been so easy. And that's why I knew it was over. That's what convinced me that there is no love left in this marriage. You just recognized it first. I had to find out the hard way. Jamie jumped up and crossed the distance between us, reaching for me, to hug or hold me. I wanted none of it. I slapped her arms away, rose and stepped away from her. Stay away from me. I want nothing to do with you. Just leave me alone. Jim, please. You can't mean that. No, I won't stay away. I love you and I won't give you up. I will smack the hell out of you if you try to touch me again. Giving up on this marriage is no longer your choice, Jamie. You threw that away when you went to that motel room with Walter Matthews. You slammed the door shut when you stayed with him that weekend and planned to do it again this time. There is no longer any love in my heart for you. You've killed all of it with your betrayal. Jamie fell to the floor, both hands holding her head as she listened to my words take away her life as my wife. She was still Jamie Parker, but she would never again be Jamie Schwann, wife of Jim Schwann. That role was over and I had already made plans to take my name back. I had already set those wheels in motion. What she didn't yet know was how I planned on punishing her lover. I had planned on being out of the house before this, but things got a little rushed. I'll sleep in the spare room until I move out. You better stay away from me and don't talk to me. Janet is aware of everything, so she'll understand. Jamie didn't seem to be listening, so I went upstairs to move my things into the spare room. I would pack most of my stuff later, but I needed some things now. When I went into the bathroom to get my supplies, I saw the ring still hanging where I left it. I looked at it and walked away, letting it stay. I was sitting in the den a few days later, working on a few papers I wanted to make sure got filed as soon as possible when the phone rang. Since I wasn't sure if Jamie was home, I reached for it. I must have picked it up at the same instant Jamie did because I heard her say hello in a quiet, subdued manner. To my surprise, it was Walter Matthews. I wasn't aware he called here. I covered the mouthpiece and listened. Jamie, it's me, Walter. What's going on? Walter, I told you never to call me here. And I told you I never wanted to see you or talk to you again, so why are you calling? Bullshit. Did you know that cuck husband of yours has filed suit against me in court for alienation of affections? He filed it in court here in Cleveland. He had me served at home in front of my wife and kids. He's subpoenaed my wife. He's suing me for $1 million. He's what? Oh my God. I knew he found out, but I didn't know he would go this far. I heard a smothered laugh before she continued. I'm sorry, Walter, but it's out of my hands. Guess you'll have to tell your wife now, won't you? Guess your broken marriage is really going to be broken up now. You lying piece of shit. After the lies you told me about your broken marriage, your hated wife, your pending divorce, you deserve this. So, go to hell. She slammed the phone down while he was still yelling. I listened until he finally gave up and then put down my receiver. From what I heard, it sounded like old Walter and Ruth cooked up a plan and sold the bill of goods to Jamie. And she was stupid enough to fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Too damned bad. She was too willing to be led by the nose by both her mother and her lover. Too willing to turn her back on me and our marriage. Too easy, that was the problem. Jamie walked in just then, looked at me with a sad expression on her face and then said, "You had this all planned out, didn't you? You were just waiting until you had it all in place before confronting me. I've been married to you for almost 20 years and I can't believe I forgot your motto. Give them maximum pain and make it hurt for a long time. I guess you're going for the maximum with Walter. How about me? What do you have planned for me?" "For you? Nothing, Jamie. I found I really hated what Walter did to me. Even if you were partly responsible, he knew better. He has a wife and 5 kids and he's screwing my wife? He's going to pay as much as I can get. And I've offered to pay Margaret for her divorce if she chooses to go that way. Maybe if you play your cards right, you can marry him when she kicks him out. You know better. I don't love him. I don't even like him right now. He lied to me about everything. He and my mother. I hate her and I hate him." She looked at me with that look she always used to get what she wanted. "Can't you forgive me and let me make it up to you? I'll never do anything like this again. You know that. Please, Jim, let me make it up." "Sorry, Jamie. You had your chance and you made your choice. Like I said, it was way too easy for you to walk away from me. Too easy by far. You made your choice and it was the wrong one." I put down my papers, turned off the desk light and stood. She took in the suit and tie and freshly polished shoes. I was dressed to go out and she saw that. "Don't wait up for me. I have a date tonight and I probably won't be back till morning. I had a date with Rachel English tonight. She told me to bring my pajamas. When I asked her why, she just laughed and said it might be fun to undress me in the morning." As I left the house, I looked back to see Jamie standing in the doorway, tears in her eyes. 5 days later, I met John at a local bar. We had a long discussion on what I planned to do and buy when I would divorce Jamie. We also had a new plan for Ruth. 3 days later, John met me at my office as a client. We had a long discussion and I introduced him to my 2 sharks. After 3 hours, John left. 5 days later, Ruth was served at her house. She screamed and ran to hit John right in front of the process server. The guy quickly called 911, and after 15 minutes Ruth was handcuffed and seated on the back seat of a police car. I helped John get a restraining order keeping Ruth away from him for the next 3 weeks. Enough time for John to clean the house and leave. What we had done was to transfer everything that John owned to my daughter Janet as a trust fund. The house was already owned by John before the marriage, so it was not part of their marriage. He had little money in the account after the trust fund and the transfer to offshore accounts. So, Ruth was in for a rude awakening. John never had to go to the court. The judge was a friend of John and the divorce was simple, both parties getting 50-50 of what they owned. Ruth got $10,000 as her settlement. John, by now, was already living in Thailand. Everything was over in 3 months. Ruth now lives in a community retirement home. As for my ex-wife, our divorce was long dragged. They even tried to get me into marriage counseling. Fortunately, the guy was a friend, and the report to the judge was quick. It helps to have friends in the right place. It took a whole year to get the divorce settled. By the time it was over, I had the house back to me and the custody of my daughter. The court was kind enough to ask Janet about her choice. She chose me and not her mother. My ex-wife got visitation rights, but Janet never met her. Every time she came to meet her, she said, "Hi, Mom. I gotta go. See you later," and just ran out. Jamie knew she was not wanted. In the last 2 years, she has aged badly and has started having health issues. I will be getting married to Rachel. Janet and Rachel spend their time planning the wedding. John is enjoying his time in Thailand and often makes a video call with his new girlfriends. They change on every call. As for Walter, he was bankrupted after his divorce. His wife took away all his money, his investments, and his house. Too many mouths to feed. That is what the mother of 5 kids pleaded in court. The judge, a close friend of another friend of mine, was emotional at the mother's pleas. Her divorce fee was a gift from me. Ruth is still in that community retirement home, and what Janet once told me is that she curses me every day. Well, karma works in strange ways. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.